We're doing the video for Native Son, the analyzation video,
The panel review.
the
Oh my.
panel, the panel review. We're doing the panel review for Native Son.
That's
So
it. That's all you got.
Matthew and Yuri.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Starting off with fear. Book one. Matthew,
Okay.
you going first.
Okay. I'll start it off. So for fear, the piece or the specific element that I believe that Richard Wright encapsulated the best, I felt that would be yeah, I felt that style would be his best, specifically his use of foreshadowing. A lot of writers they choose to wait to have all the nitty gritty at the end and like not exactly showcase what the ending is going to be like. However, Richard Wright's use of style and foreshadowing actually pretty much told us what was going to happen at the beginning. Specifically when Bigger is talking to Gus on page 19, they're having a
What do you
conversation.
mean by that? What do you mean by
What do you mean?
showed us what's going to happen? Like at the end of
Um,
the
Yeah,
book,
yeah,
or
what event?
like Bigger pretty much already knew that something was going to happen in his life that forced him to make some critical decisions, and he felt bad about it. He literally said in his conversation, he was like, "Sometimes I feel something awful is going to happen to me."
what
And he
page is
said,
this on?
"This is on page 19." He literally like yeah he actually I'll read the specific text. Sometimes I feel like something's awful is going to happen to me. Bigger spoke with a tinge of bitter pride in his voice. What do you mean? Gus asked, looking at him quickly. There was fear in Gus's eyes. I don't know. I just feel that way. Every time I get to thinking about me being black and they being white, me being here and they being there, I feel like something awful is going to happen to me. And this was actually turned out to be true. Which literally that same day he would end up accidentally carrying Mary Dalton, and that will cause the chain of events that would happen later on in the novel. Wright's like use of this was very impactful, and it actually kind of translates to the emotional and psychological toll of African Americans during this time period. A lot of them felt as though because of this their skin color, they had to walk on eggshells and they didn't actually have full control over their life and they didn't actually feel safe and they always felt that something bad was going to happen if they were to interact with the opposite race. So yeah, that's why I believe that in Fear style and specifically foreshadowing was Richard Wright's best attribute.
So rather than like the way it's written, you're talking about like the plotting, like the sequence of events in the story, like how it's like my style, like what about this? Just rather than the style of writing, you're talking about his use of like the way it's structured in the story. That's what you're saying.
I wouldn't necessarily say it's plot because plot is necessarily how like the story takes place, but I would say it was his use of style because he actually told us like it it wouldn't it doesn't necessarily tie to plot because like this is like one specific event in the book and one specific type of writing that will go on to later be used down the line. However, plot would be more so if um like
Okay,
he can actually I'm kind of like yeah I don't really think like foreshadowing really connects to plot.
how would you describe it in a adjective, like in an adjective? How would you describe his style? Because I think that's what you're trying to get at, but I don't think the word foreshadow is really doing what you're talking about justice. So, like, if you could use an adjective to describe his style of writing in using foreshadowing, what word?
Um, maybe like prophetic. You know, like it was kind of like a prophecy that it was kind of
Oh,
like
yeah.
it was kind of like a prophecy that that Bigger pretty much stated. He literally said it himself. He was like, "I feel something bad is gonna happen," and then less than 24 hours later, he accidentally killed Mary. So I guess it would be more so like it was poetic. It was prophetic in how Richard Wright wrote this specific portion.
All right, Richard Wright, the prophet. Okay,
You got an issue
on,
with that?
onto Yuri.
Um. Okay. Mine was on page 93. And well, to start off, I think at this point in the story where he has killed Mary, there's like some controversy and debate of like the motives, like just who he is as a character, like is he shaped by fear? So I think I found this piece of text really interesting. Oh yeah, he had to burn this girl. With eyes glazed, with nerves tingling with excitement, he looked about the basement. He saw a hatchet. Yes, that would do it. He spread a neat layer of newspapers
Wait,
beneath the head.
93?
Yeah, I'm saying 90, this is on 93 or 83.
92, my bad.
Oh,
Okay.
I'll just reread it. He had to burn this girl. With eyes glazed, with nerves tingling with excitement, he looked about the basement. He saw a hatchet. Yes, that would do it. He spread a neat layer of newspaper beneath the head so the blood would not drip on the floor. He got the hatchet, held the head at a slanting angle with the left hand. After pausing in an attitude of prayer, he sent the blade of the hatchet into the bone of the throat with all the strength of his body. The head rolled off. He was not crying, but his lips were trembling and his chest was heaving. Um, and then blah blah blah. And then he wanted to lie upon the floor and sleep off the horror of this thing. So I just think it's really interesting how at the end it's like we see two different characters with Bigger here. We see like this weird his nerves are
but can you
tingling
say
with
what
excitement.
your thing is?
Characterization. Yeah, this is characterization. So like him tingling with excitement, but then later he's talking about like the horror of the thing. So I think what we see throughout the text, even like way further beyond, is like these just how we almost see two characters of Bigger. So like it's for me it was like kind of hard to characterize him after reading the text. So I mean he is like a I would describe him as like a complex character, but like it's hard to really pin him as like evil or like like in this moment like afraid like just
And like
uh
Richard Wright is able to balance Bigger's like cruel mentality along with the fear he feels for the act that he's doing. Like he knows what he's doing is wrong, but because of the situation that he's been put in, he has to act in his cruel natural. Like we know that naturally Bigger is like has some like cruel tendencies, but he's also being forced to do that in this situation, and he knows that it's wrong.
exactly that's basically what I was heading at as well. Like I think I mean this one I will talk more about this like later when we get some more parts of the text open up to us, but it kind of like shows like what Richard Wright was the purpose of making Bigger like as a character for to contribute to the whole theme of the novel of or a theme of the novel. And that theme would be like prejudice is not okay to anyone, whether you're evil, whether you're simply a product of your environment, like it's unjustified no matter who you are. So I think like him writing this character that you can describe as like being in constant hysteria and fear, but also being like heavily flawed and like even evil in some cases, they kind of like show this point, this theme really well. So I just want
When characterizing Bigger, would you say that him killing Mary or the actions and repercussions he would face after killing Mary was the reason for his change?
what change? What are you talking about change?
Like his change in mentality. You know how like before he killed her, he was more so like not necessarily on edge, but he was more so angry. He was more so
Mm.
unruly. He wasn't necessarily calculated as opposed to after he killed her, he was more so like trying to find my way out of it. He was more so trying to how do I put this? He started changing his approach when it came to things as to try and move out of a certain situation.
Yeah, I think I see what you mean. I think he changes, but like he doesn't. Like he keeps both of those traits. Like in the
Mm-hmm.
jail cell at the very end, like he's like just like showing how he like regrets doing it, but also like he had to go. Like is he's almost like he's bipolar. Like he has like
Mm-hmm.
two almost like personality that he has. So yeah, he does like this does I think marks a huge like turning point in his character, but he still has the remnants of like what he was before and also what he has after Mary.
Okay, I got you. All right, what you think, Zaire?
Okay. Well, I already
Not so bad like for your attribute.
um okay, so for mine, I would like to talk about setting and specifically Chicago redlining in the context of this book. And page 21, uh, and the context is Bigger is talking to Gus about how black people and white people are just divided in Chicago. And basically, redlining is the act of purposely limiting resources for a designated section of a city. And in Chicago, these redline sections were predominantly black communities, and they would redline these black communities and give them less resources and limit their ability to thrive. And basically, Bigger asks like where the white folks live, and Gus tells him over across the line over there on Cottage Grove Avenue. And the line can be interpreted like metaphorically and literally, as Gus could literally be talking about the geographical location of where they live. Like because there's if you were to look for Chicago from above, you could literally see a line separating like wealthy neighborhoods from unwealthy neighborhoods. But also, he's most likely referencing the difference in resources that middle class white residents of Chicago have compared to black South Side residents like Gus and Bigger. And this setting is important to the understanding of why Bigger displays so much hatred for white people throughout the fear and throughout the whole course of the book, because Bigger hates his financial situation that limits his freedom, and practice like redlining only worsens his chances of ever reaching any type of like financial independence, which hinders his freedom.
So when you make this like when you're talking about this subject, it's important to like know like what do you think Wright's motivation was with this, with the setting, with creating Bigger in this area? Do you think he's trying to make a character that's a product of his environment that's like kind of justified, like that's you can feel sympathy for, or
I
like what
do
do you
think
think?
he's trying to make a case for sympathy for Bigger, because anybody reading the story would know that Bigger obviously is a cruel natured person. But his environment also has an effect on that. And to an extent, to how much of an extent his environment has on that, that's up to the reader's interpretation. But Wright carefully places this into the story to just kind of create a case for the reader to believe that Bigger might not be entirely just cruel, but there are things that affect him and his mentality about how he moves throughout the world.
So how would you feel that Richard Wright contrasts Bigger's setting and Bigger's livelihood inside Chicago's redlining neighborhoods as opposed to when he goes to the Dalton's house in their neighborhoods?
Whoa, can you repeat that?
how would you feel? How did you feel Richard Wright contrasts Bigger's experiences inside his redlining neighborhoods as opposed to being inside the Dalton's house in their neighborhood?
Well, okay, so in Bigger's neighborhood, he's kind of he's kind of like the guy, like he's kind of the leader of his group of friends and stuff, like, and he admitted that he's done numerous different like crimes with them that he hasn't gotten necessarily caught for. But in the Dalton's area, he acts super like careful and he's super like observant about everything that's around him, where he might not act like that in a comfortable neighborhood, where he feels like he might have more freedom in, even though he has no freedom really anywhere because of his situation.
All right, gotcha.
To book two, the flight.
Okay.
Matthew.
All right. So for the flight, the element that I felt that Richard Wright used to the best degree would be characterization, specifically of Bigger. And the reason I felt this is going similar to off what Yuri said about how Bigger's mentality has sort of changed over time. Like throughout flight, we're kind of seeing a lot of different mentals of Bigger as he slowly progresses down and down into a darker hole of trying to escape from killing Mary. And at the beginning, he's very like it's literally the day after he's killed her, and he's still relatively like on edge. Like he hasn't really fell down the rabbit hole of what he would go on later down. However, I want to say around page 113 is when we really start to notice how darker that Bigger's mentality has sort of taken. At the end of the page, he literally says, uh, "Hell, she made me do it. I couldn't help it. She should have known better. She should have left me alone." Going to the next page. God damn it. He did not feel sorry for Mary. She was not real to him, not a human being. He had not known her for long or well enough for that. He felt that his murder of her was more than amply justified by the fear and the shame she had made him feel. So this is really when we start, like Richard Wright starts to get into the nitty gritty with Bigger's character, because he's complex, he's changing because of the situations that is impacting him. And weirdly, Richard Wright sort of makes it justified because at the end of the day, he knows what's going to happen if he gets caught in this situation. It's kind of like he's on edge to a point where it's actually like you can sort of, while he's not right, you can sort of feel for him because he doesn't want to be in jail, he doesn't want to be lynched, he doesn't want to be murdered. So that's really what takes Richard Wright's style, like use of characterization of Bigger to the next level.
How do you think like definitely there's been scenes like the end near the jail scene where he's like talking about the regret that he faces, that like the shame that he has. Like how do those things contrast and like affect like the quote you just took for he seems like almost cruel and like
Well, at
without
that point, Bigger realizes it's over. They're like around this sort of area, Bigger still has a chance, and that's why his mentality is different. That's why he's still like, oh my god, this was not my fault. I didn't do this. I didn't mean to do this, because he still thinks he can get away with it. However, by the end of the chapter, well, excuse me, by the end of the book, you notice, he doesn't want to eat, he doesn't want to drink, he doesn't want to do anything because he knows the jig is up. He knows everything's done, and by nothing he can do to get out of it. So now he finally takes accountability for his actions, and while he didn't mean to do it, at the end of the day, he realizes, yeah, I did it. There's nothing I can do to take that back, and mentally he finds peace with what he's done.
do you wait one more? Do you feel like he was justified like when you talk about like how Mary made her do it? Like do
No,
you
no, of course not. That's not. That's my opinion, though. That's like I
just wondering,
don't think he was justified. No.
even with the fear that he says
While I think his mentality of feeling that way is correct,
mm,
saying somebody else is responsible for their own death in this type of situation where she's intoxicated, no, I don't feel that's justified.
Do you think he had any before she got intoxicated? Do you think before like they started going to all these different places, you know how Mary kind of
Hmm.
wanted him to like take her to wherever the Jan's house. Do you think that he made the right decision in trying to appease her instead of just taking her to where she was supposed to go in the first place? Do you think he did
Um,
the right for doing that?
that's a touchy subject because on one hand, that's his employer. He has to listen to her,
Well, not
otherwise he doesn't know what
necessarily
to happen.
because
That's
Mr.
it's really
Dalton,
Mr. Dalton,
or
but
Mr. I mean, Mary is just the result of that employment.
But you got to remember what we were talking about in DC Lit. You got to remember, while Mr. Dalton is paying the checks, at the end of the day, Mr. Dalton is still has power over him. So then you can really classify her as somewhat of an employer or a rule maker or a manager of some sort, because she still has power over him and can get him in touchy situations to where he can be fired. But going back to the question at hand, it's really a touchy subject because you gotta like. There's no way you can't put race in it. He has, after the conversation they had earlier in the day, he feels fear towards her. He doesn't feel in control. So I would say that he was in his right mind in doing that because he didn't know how she would react if he said no.
Mhm.
All right, but yeah, that's why I
Uh,
believe. Yeah.
on to your
I did POV for my section on fate, and for the context behind my passage, it's when they're kind of clearing out the ashes, like right before Mary's like bones getting revealed. They're kind of like it's like the anxious moment of him like wondering what they're looking at.
what is
So
your
POV
okay POV?
for this one, it's going to be third person limited, only like really what it is the whole story, which is just looking at
Yeah.
Figure's mind. um, he saw the man stoop and poke the shovel into the ashes. What's he looking at? Figure's muscles twitched. He wanted to run to the man's side and see what it was he was looking at. He had in his mind an image of Mary's head lying there bloody and unburnt before the man's eyes. Suddenly, the man straightened, only to stoop again, as though unable to decide if the evidence of his eyes was true. Bigger edged forward, his lungs not taking in or letting out air. He himself was a huge furnace, now through which no air could go. So, I think POV did a huge impact on the scene on like creating some anxiety. So, as opposed to like many other third persons that don't have go into the mind of Bigger, like it doesn't like specific quotes like what's he looking at? Like that's something that just really shows the worry of Bigger, as well as like his muscles twitching, his lungs not taking in or letting out air. I think all of these things do a really good job. This POV did a really good job of getting like creating anxiety, like displaying anxiety not only for Bigger but also kind of anxiety for the reader, like what's gonna happen. And I think also it kind of indirectly reveals some type of characterization about him. Like his whole like facade, like his confidence is kind of like crumbling down, and like it's just yeah, he's cooked.
Um,
Wait,
you want to
Matthew,
ask your first, later? You want to ask yours first?
just you go.
Okay. Why do you feel Wright used third person limited in this section instead of first person, and how did that translate over to the overall feel of your particular section?
Yeah, so that's what I've been thinking about that. So first person, like I feel it doesn't is more encapsulates the thoughts rather than the actions of the character. So like I feel like in first person, something like the way his breath, like his Bigger's muscles twitched. He wanted to run to the wait, yeah, his Bigger's muscles twitched, and the way his lungs didn't let out. Like those, I think it's the actions that really separate from like first person and like third
Yeah, Bigger
person.
wouldn't be able to notice that himself if.
Yeah, almost like that. Like, and we don't get his full thoughts. We just get little pieces like, oh, what's he looking at? And stuff like that. I think that like without giving the full like view of Bigger's mind, but also like seeing how he reacts is much more laid out and like cleverly displayed rather than like a first person or like some other type of third person. Like
I also think like third person allows for more of like for a reader to formulate their own thoughts on a character. Like when you're in first person, you're just kind of guided through the whole book through the lens of that character. But when you have a narrator who's kind of guiding you through some of the thought, like a limited thought process of a character, then the reader is also able to kind of they're able to place their selves in that character situation without being completely guided through it.
Yep,
exactly.
true,
Like
true.
I think like this book would be completely different if it was written in first person. Like we don't know everything about Bigger. Like we don't. I feel like it would be much more of a flat book if we just had all of his thoughts, like everything that he's ever done, like everything that he's thinking at each moment. Like it's something different to see like his actions and as like well as like the limited thoughts that are shown. I think that gains more like the novel's purpose. I think it gives more of a vague character instead of like a specific like it's trying to connect to multiple people, not just talking about this one instance. It's talking about like maybe multiple events happen. Like so,
Hmm.
I think that's another like important thing of third person.
I got you.
Okay.
I was not you,
Okay. So after Bigger escapes from the intense investigation from the investigators from Mr. Dalton and the police force or whatever, the press, whatever. He goes into hiding with Bessie, and he is basically like telling her like that she has to cooperate with him or else like he's gonna have to kill her because she knows too much. But anyway, they kind of end up in this kind of well abandoned house, and what I want to talk about is the also point of view with Bigger's perspective on raping Bessie and how third person limited kind of contributes to that. And so yeah, basically, Wright highlights how mentally unstable Bigger is with this scene, and while he's raping Bessie, she tells him, "Don't, Bigger, don't." And while Bigger never verbally responds to her, he does think to himself that he was sorry, and he was sorry, but he had to. And this is on page 234. And if the scene were to be written from like Bessie's perspective, and yeah, if the scene were to be written from Bessie's perspective, we would only have gotten to know like about her fear of Bigger and not that Bigger knew that what he was doing was wrong. But the way that Wright wrote it, the reader also gets to experience the complexity of Bigger's power dynamic with Bessie. Because while he does clearly have power over her, she also has some sort of power over him in this situation because she knows about what he did. And this kind of all contributes to his hysteria regarding his citywide search. And Bigger clearly has some type of compassion for Bessie. And because she's the only one that he told the full story about murdering Mary to, but he's cruel enough to simultaneously degrade Bessie to the point of her being almost like this servant to him.
How do you think like so you talk about if it was from Bessie's POV, but what if it was like a first person of Bigger instead of like the third person?
Um, well, I think we would kind of get the same thing if it was first person point of view because it's only an interaction between those two characters, and Richard Wright talks about the thoughts of Bigger and what Bessie is saying. So I don't think it would really matter if this were written in first person or uh what he already wrote in third person limited because we get the thoughts of Bigger.
Bigger told Bessie he was like, when he mentally said, I had to do this, I had to violate her. How does that compare and contrast with how he felt he had to murder Mary?
Well, it obviously contrasts with how he had to murder Mary because he did not accidentally rape Bessie. Like he
Hmm.
clearly did that on purpose. But and well, I mean, there was no fear factor in this because he didn't do it accidentally. He did it on purpose, and he only did it for the purpose of his own pleasure. Um, but the act of killing her after and throwing her down like the chute or whatever, that was an act of fear because he told Bessie everything that he did, and he didn't want to have the risk of her going around and maybe she got caught and she had to tell the investigative force or whatever that about what he did. So that part of it had a fear factor, but the rape itself was just a cruel act of Bigger that kind of those two acts together kind of not balance it out because it's all cruel. He did kill Bessie out of his own will. It wasn't accidental. But it did have a purpose, unlike raping her, which was just to fulfill his pleasure in that moment.
To add on to that, like I feel like it's interesting to contrast these two events. Like, and for this one, the killing of Bessie, like the getting rid of the body, kind of is fueled by fear, while killing Mary was fueled by fear. Like it's like almost the exact opposite. Like how when he butchered Mary, it was not. It was like he had to do it. It was like it was not that. It was not a fear factor. It was something he had to do. While he raping Bessie was like what he said he had to do. So I think it's like in ways I think they are can be something pretty similar, but I think at the core they're different. But there's something like there is definitely like parallels there.
On to book three, Fate.
Fate. All right. So the element I felt that Richard Wright expertly used was POV, third person subjective. In this particular section, it's now what I'm talking, like contrasting with what you guys were talking about, which is when he like hit this mentality of, oh, I have to do this, I have to kill them, I have to rape her, this, that, and the third. Now we're moving towards when he sort of has acceptance to what he's done, give or take. On page 275, Bigger, he finally has this realization of, oh, like all that I did led up, all like I did to this really didn't mean anything. I really killed these people. I really did this, that, and the third. And he's kind of having some sort of remorse for it. Specifically, he says, well, Richard Wright states, a new pride and a new humility would have been born into him, a humility springing from some part of the world from which he lived. And his voice, his inner voice changed. He's more quiet. He's more reserved. He's not trying to answer any questions. He's just he literally told the people he was, the attorneys, he was like, I don't care. Don't hurt anybody else. I did this, that, and the third. It is what it is. But that only really changes after the opposing attorney tried to pin all these other things on him. But he accounted for the fact that he murdered Mary, and he was able to reflect on that, and he was willing to accept the damages and repercussions he was going to face, as opposed to when at the mid to end of flight, when he was really trying to get up out of there, he was trying to, oh no, I had to do this. I'm gonna make it out of there, and he was on the run.
So I think that I can kind of connect this back to how he had to kind of act at the Daltons, or how he was acting at when he was employed at the Daltons. Like he was reserved. He was like super like it was kind of different than how he had been acting before with his family and stuff. He was in an uncomfortable space, so he had to act in an uncomfortable way for him. And as opposed to there, where after he killed Mary, he had to basically lie his way through everything. In this situation, he has nothing to lose because he's already at rock bottom. So now it's just like, I'm just going to tell them everything. And I can kind of see a progression in his character, because he's kind of looking out for others, like you said. Like he doesn't want anybody else to get involved with this. So he's just kind of saying everything is his fault, and he doesn't want anybody else to get involved with it. And he's not just looking out for himself, but he's looking out for others, which is something that probably the readers did not think about before, this, passage.
Mhm.
So going back to the theme that I kind of was mentioning earlier about how unjustified prejudice and like other forms of racism have been shown in the book. Um, Bigger has now gone through all of that through fear, through flight, and I think the sympathy that is causing is a root of that. And he does not want that. He kind of wants to end the cycle. He wants to like protect other people. He doesn't want anyone else to get involved. So I think like this shows kind of a character growth and how like horrible, while also illustrating how horrible prejudice can be too. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
What were you be talking about, Yuri?
I know. I'm. What am I?
You don't even know what element. Oh my god.
Okay. For my passage, I'm going to be talking about setting and specifically like the jails. So to start off, for the context of my passage, it's kind of when the Daltons and Buckley is kind of in his jail cell, and then his mom, his folks are about to enter. So here it is. Bigger cringe. Not this. Not here. Not now. He did not want his mother to come in here now, with these people standing ground. He looked about with a wild, pleading expression. Buckley watched him, then turned back to the policeman. Though he sat, Bigger felt his legs trembling. He was so tense in body and mind that when the door swung in, he bounded up and stood in the middle of the room. He saw his mother's face. He wanted to run to push her back through the door. She was standing still, one hand upon the doorknob. The other hand clutched a frayed pocketbook, which she dropped and ran to him, throwing her arms around about him, crying. So, honestly, the setting of the jail is not like, the aspect of the jail is not described in great detail, and I think that's like intentional. I think it's intentionally vague, because this jail cell, like when reading, I think it's like a catalyst. It's like a location just meant for Bigger to handle like all the regrets that he's had. Like he's with the Daltons, with Jan, with his parents. Like this setting of the jail is a place where he talks to his past basically before Mary, and like kind of not reconciles, but like confronts them, see what they have to say. So I
almost like
think
a
it,
figurative place of reflection. Like it's
Mhm.
not
yeah, yeah,
actually
yeah.
a place. It's not like in the context of Bigger's mind, it's not a physical place, but rather just a like a piece. It brings his mind into a space of reflection.
So going back to the setting, to start for the mood. So as we've always, I think I can speak for everyone that Bigger is like this cruel person. Like whether he's a product of his environment, he's done evil deeds, he's done evil things. However, like the mood is just him reconnecting with all these characters, like Jan feeling the sympathy, blah blah, like his mom coming in and hugging him. It creates a mood for the reader as well as a tone for Bigger, like the sympathy. Even this character that we've probably didn't agree with nor like, it creates some type of sympathy for the reader, and I think that's just it was surprising for me when reading it that I was actually able to feel emotion for him through the
Mhm.
setting.
Okay, so Yuri, how much of Bigger's reflection in the jail cell feels like personal growth versus resignation?
I feel like there's definitely a split there. So starting off with Jan, which I think was like the one of the bigger people that Bigger met,
Hmm.
um, there's definitely a lot of growth there. So there was a big realization that he had once he realized that Jan, even though he killed Mary, like Jan still had like the sympathy for him, like that still um forgave him basically and like saw him as a person. And I have a quote here. He's like, "This white man believed in me, and the moment he felt belief, he felt guilty again, but in a different sense now." So like there's like this growth that Bigger does, like that people can see him, even white people that like there's people beyond like this border, like people can see him as a real human being, not just like this murderous rapist that they're like showing earlier. But also there is like some resignation like with his mother coming in and realize the state that he's in and the mistakes he's made, like the sadness that he felt. Like I think there is a big split 50-50 of his growth as well as his resignation.
All right, now you there.
Okay, so for my passage in Fate, I'm going to be talking about Bigger's characterization, and specifically how he um uh feels like his death will be tactically used to instill fear in the Black community. Um, so for starters, I think it's really interesting how Wright Richard Wright writes this passage in a way that makes it that makes Bigger like concern about the greater impact of his death. Because reading the story, you wouldn't really figure that he's like some guy who's thinking about the greater impact of his decisions and stuff on like a national level or things like
Hmm.
that. You would kind of think he just thinks about himself or his like close community. But in this, he's saying, and I quote, "The atmosphere of the crowd told him that they were going to use his death as a bloody symbol to fear, or a symbol of fear to wave before the eyes of that black world." And that's on page 276.
Hmm.
And it's kind of interesting how Bigger's biggest problem is that he's isn't that he's about to die. It's that um his biggest problem is that his death will be used as a symbol of fear, and he doesn't have the power to control what his death will be used as. And that kind of goes back to his whole character about like lacking freedom, or his thoughts about lacking freedom. And if he doesn't have the power to control what his death means, that means that he lacks freedom, and that disturbs him. And it says it right here after that line. And as he felt it, rebellion rose in him. So he's not even like concerned with like the immediate death. He's just concerned that he doesn't have the freedom to even choose how his death what his death means to others. And Wright kind of successfully developed the notion of Bigger's extreme mental quirks. Like a normal person, I guess, would be thinking about like, oh, I'm about to die, but that's not what Bigger's thinking about. He's just thinking about like the impact of his death. And it's like going back to earlier, like thinking about someone else would probably be thinking of in the moment of killing like Mary on the run, they would be thinking about the national level, but Bigger was thinking about himself. I mean, obviously, a normal person would be thinking about themselves as well, but they'll probably be thinking about like how does this impact my family and stuff like that. But it's only until he gets to jail that Bigger starts thinking about like how would this impact everyone else, while someone normal might start thinking only about themselves. So I think it's kind of going to this passage kind of just highlights how different Bigger is than others. And it just solidifies his like kind of psychotic nature and character.
I do have to
Um,
disagree with you
okay, go ahead. Yuri, you good.
on like one point. I don't think it was entirely out of character for Bigger to have these thoughts. Like although there's definitely a huge growth in how he became like selfish to this kind of like this thought process, but he throughout the story he has made like these connections of like this of how much of a like a victim to prejudice and racism black people are, and like the the divide in society and how they're constantly labeled. So I don't he has mentioned things like that, so I don't think it's entirely out of character. But on the other hand, I do have one question. Do you think his death, like do you think um like his death in the story, do you think it did cause what he was afraid of happening, or do you think
Um, so one off like what you said, Zaire, you can kind of circle it back to like this theme of how during that time period, they used certain people as scapegoats. Specifically, in this case, Bigger was used as a scapegoat to showcase how society weaponizes fear and racism and strips Black people of their humanity and turns them into symbols of criminality. And actually, going on what you said, that kind of reminded me of when he was reading the newspaper, and literally the headline was "Negro rapist faints at inquest." It didn't like that is all that they knew him for. They didn't use his name. They used his name earlier in the newspaper when Mary was first discovered, but now he's just a Negro rapist, and that's all that they will point him as. So like that's kind of like what I feel that Richard Wright was more so trying to encapsulate with Bigger's character and how he would be used as a scapegoat to represent how they own like. And when you're pointed in as the victim, that all. I mean, when you're pointed in as the attacker, when you're pointed in as the person doing something as sinister as what they thought he did, that's all you will ever be.
And just to like kind of wrap stuff up, like this book was made because of the Scottsmore Awards. Like this was
Yep.
the very beginning of the year we read an article about it,
Mhm.
and I think there's like this take of where the main character actually does do it instead of like what actually happened in real life or what's happened like Kill a Mockingbird, like um on what happened, and but also it makes it like really it makes it real. It makes like hold on.
For watching this, Mr. Campbell. It's been a pleasure to do this panel review with Matthew and Yuri. We gained insight on this story, and I feel like I have a deeper understanding of it, and I'm sure those two feel the same way, right,
Mhm.
guys?
Mhm.
Yeah, that concludes it. Native Son, read it.
All right.
Great
All
book.
right. Thank you guys. All right.